The music was so loud, it felt like a physical pressure against my chest. The lights were these bright strobing colors, flashes of blue and red and green, that left little afterimages on the inside of my eyelids every time I blinked. And the sound of it all, you know, that specific sound of a party in full swing, the low hum of a dozen different conversations, all happening at once, layered over the thumping bass from the speakers, the sharp, bright sound of laughter, real or forced. I could never quite tell, the constant, high-pitched clinking of glasses as people toasted and mingled. It was all supposed to feel like joy, like celebration. But to me, it just felt like a very elaborate, very noisy disguise, a glittering illusion that everyone had agreed to believe in for the night. Yes, she said slowly, everyone is here. She wasn't looking at the crowd anymore, she was looking directly at me. It's easy to show up for the big party, isn't it, when there's music and food, and everyone is watching? The garage was the only option. It was a disaster zone, a graveyard for half-finished projects, Christmas decorations, and that exercise bike that now serves as a very expensive clothes hanger. The clearing out process was an archaeological dig into my own failings. I found a box labeled Tax Documents, 2014, next to a bag of grout mix, from a tiling project abandoned in 2018. It was cathartic in a way. I was excavating my own procrastination. Then came the build. I decided to do it myself, a bold, perhaps foolish decision. The first casualty was my thumb, which had an intimate and painful meeting with a hammer. The instructions for the shelving units were clearly written by someone who had never actually assembled anything. There were parts labeled G and H that looked identical, but the diagram insisted they were different. I spent an entire Saturday trying to figure out why a bookcase was leaning like the Tower of Pisa, before realizing I had installed the entire back panel upside down. I incorporated her advice, but on my terms. She said I needed better lighting, so I didn't get a trendy neon sign. I installed a massive industrial-style LED light fixture that was so bright you could perform surgery in there. It was functional, it was brilliant. She said I needed an aesthetic, so I created one. I called it Organized Chaos. One wall was a giant pegboard with all my tools, including my whittling knife, shanging in perfect labeled outlines. It looked like a serial killer's workshop, but a very, very tidy one. I built a huge desk out of a salvage door. I stained it a dark walnut. It was scarred and had character, just like me. The piece de resistance was the Wi-Fi. I ran a dedicated line out there. It was faster than anywhere else in the house. The signal was so strong it probably gave the squirrels in the yard 5G after weeks of work, of sawdust and sweat, and more than a few words. My daughter, definitely, should not have heard. It was done, it was perfect, it was mine, it was functional, comfortable, and it had my weird personality stamped all over it. It was a real, tangible success. The big reveal day arrived. I told her I had a surprise in the garage. She looked skeptical, probably expecting a new, equally pathetic hobby, like attempting to build a canoe out of popsicle sticks. I handed her a sleep mask. Just put it on, I said. She sighed, the epic sigh of a teenager enduring a parent's nonsense. But she complied. I led her by the shoulders through the house, out the back door, and into the garage. I positioned her in the center of the room. The smell of fresh paint and wood stain hung in the air. Okay, I said, my voice a little shaky. You can look. She pulled off the mask, and she just stopped. Her eyes, which were usually rolling or glazed over, were wide. They scanned the room, the pegboard wall, the massive desk, the clean, organized shelves, holding my respectable coffee maker, and my no-upgraded whole bean coffee, the brutalist light fixture. She took it all in. Her mouth was slightly open. She took a few slow steps, running a hand over the smooth surface of the desk. The silence stretched. It was the longest 10 seconds of my life. I was braced for another critique. The ergonomics of that chair are questionable, Dad, or the feng shui is all wrong. I felt a coldness start to spread in my chest. What do you mean? Finally, she turned to me. She blinked, a small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. Okay, Dad, she said, her voice quiet, devoid of its usual sarcastic edge. This is actually cool. It was like winning the Nobel Prize, the Pulitzer, every award all at once. My chest swelled with a pride I hadn't felt since she was born. Then she broke the moment. She pulled out her phone, not to critique, but to check the connection. Her eyes widened again. Whoa, the Wi-Fi is amazing in here. She looked at me, a real, genuine, full-wattage smile now on her face. So can I do my homework in here? My room's connection is terrible. And that was it. That was the ultimate victory. I had built something so legit, so effectively cool, that my teenage daughter actually wanted to spend time in it, not because I had tried to be like her, but because I had finally fully become a better version of myself. I had earned her reluctant approval. And let me tell you, that's a success no viral video could ever match. The party was supposed to be a celebration, a marker of another year. Successfully navigated the house. Was full, the food was good, people were smiling. I remember standing by the fireplace, a glass in my hand, feeling that particular warmth of a host who believes the event is going well. I saw my daughter talking with a group of her friends in the corner. She was laughing. I felt a surge of pride. See, this is success, a happy family, a comfortable home, a child who wants to bring her friends into it. Later, I found a moment to pull her aside just to check in. I asked her about her classes, her plans. For the summer, the conversation was light, pleasant. And then I made a comment. I don't even remember the exact words now. It was something about her future, something bland and encouraging, the kind of thing a father is supposed to say. You're on such a great path, maybe. You're going to be so successful. She didn't respond with anger, not at first. It was more like a slow deflation, the energy just drained from her face. She looked at me, and her eyes weren't those of a teenager being mildly annoyed by a parent. They were clear and terribly direct. She said, "Dad, that's the problem. You keep using that word, successful. What does that even mean to you? Because, from where I'm standing, it just looks like you've gotten really good at being comfortable." The noise of the party didn't disappear, but it transformed. It became a dull roar, a backdrop to the sudden silence that had opened up between us. It wasn't an accusation fueled by teenage rebellion. It was an observation, a clinical, devastatingly accurate observation. And it held up a mirror I had been avoiding for years. My initial reaction was defensive, of course. Internally, I started compiling a list of all the ways I was successful. I provided for this family. I put a roof over your head, food on the table. We go on vacations. I've loved you. I've been here for you. I've tried to be a good father. Isn't that success? But her words echoed comfortable. Had I simply conflated contentment with success? Had I somewhere along the line settled? The question was so unsettling, because it didn't feel like an attack from the outside. It felt like a truth I had been whispering to myself in quiet moments, finally given a voice. I mean, the hard part is showing up when it's quiet, she said, her voice still low, but losing its polite flatness, when there's no audience, when it's just hard. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling. It was like a splinter in my mind. I had to understand what she meant, and more importantly, what I truly believed. I started reading not business books, or anything about career advancement, but philosophy. I went back to the Greeks, Aristotle, and his concept of eudaimonia, often translated as human flourishing. It wasn't about pleasure or wealth, but about living in accordance with your virtues, realizing your potential. I read about different cultures, about how some societies measure a life well-lived by the strength of its community bonds, by the wisdom passed down, not by the accumulation of possessions. I started talking to people, really talking. I had conversations with friends I'd known for decades, but we'd only ever talked about sports, work, the usual things. I asked them point blank what success meant to them now at this stage in life. The answers were surprising. One friend, a highly paid lawyer, confessed that he felt most successful when he was in his workshop, building a piece of furniture with his hands, creating something tangible. Another said success to him was simply that his adult children still wanted to come over for dinner and talk to him. I talked to my own father. I asked him what he hoped for when he was my age. He said, "I wanted you to be safe and happy." I thought, if I worked hard enough to provide that, I'd have succeeded. I never really asked myself if I was successful on my own terms. That hit hard. I realized I was operating on a definition of success that was a ghost of my father's definition, which was probably a ghost of his father's, a chain of unexamined expectations. And in confronting that, I had to confront my own fears. The fear of ambition. Was it too late to want more for myself, not in a material sense, but in a spiritual, intellectual sense? The fear of failure. If I tried to redefine my life and fell short, would that be worse than never trying at all? The fear of being judged. What would people think if I stepped off the well-trodden path? But the most persistent fear was the one my daughter had exposed, the fear of having already settled, of having chosen comfort over a truly meaningful existence. This period of reflection wasn't a passive one. It demanded an action, a tangible change. And that change manifested itself in the decision to build my office, not just a room with a desk, but a space that would be a physical manifestation of this new evolving understanding. The old office was a corner of the bedroom, a laptop on a small table, bills stacked nearby. It was functional, but it reflected nothing of value. It was a space for chores. The new office would be different. I decided to build it myself from the ground up. The process became a meditative practice. Choosing the location wasn't about convenience. It was about light and perspective. I picked a room that faced the garden, so I could see the trees change through the seasons. Every step was intentional. Sanding the floorboards was a task to be finished. It was a rhythm, a time for thought. Applying the stain, I considered what I wanted this space to feel like: warm, grounded, a place for focused work. Yes, but also a sanctuary for thought. Then came furnishing it. This was where the values became concrete. The desk, I didn't want a mass-produced piece. I found a local woodworker and commissioned a desk made from reclaimed oak. It was solid, imperfect, full of history and character. It represented creativity and a respect for craftsmanship. The bookshelf wasn't just for storage. I built it to hold the books that had started this journey: works of philosophy, the poetry, the histories, alongside family photo albums. It was a statement that knowledge. I didn't know what to say. I made a joke, a weak, stupid joke. I said, well, I've never been a fan of quiet, you know. That I was trying to deflect, to lighten the mood, to slip back into the comfortable role of the fun's slightly frivolous dad. And family heritage were of equal importance. I hung a map of the world on one wall, not because I travel much, but to represent curiosity, a connection to something larger. On another wall, I framed a few of my daughter's childhood drawings, a reminder of the initial catalyst, and a symbol that love and family are the bedrock of any meaningful achievement. The office became more than a room. It is a tool for focused work, but it is also a sanctuary. When I sit there, everything in the space aligns to a purpose. It reminds me that my actions should be intentional, that my work should be an expression of my values, not just a means to an end. The act of building it was as important as the finished product. It was the process of aligning action with purpose. A few months after it was finished, I showed it to my daughter. She stood in the doorway, and I saw her taking it all in: the light from the window, the solidity of the desk, the books, the drawings. I didn't just say, here's my new office. I walked her through it. I told her about the wood for the desk, where it came from. I showed her the books that had changed my perspective. I explained the map, the photos. I shared the journey, the confusion, the reflection, the fear, and finally the decision to build this space as a daily reminder. She listened quietly, then she walked over to the bookshelf and ran her fingers along the spines of the books. She turned to me and said, so this is what you meant. And I said, this is a part of it. Success to me now isn't a destination, it's the integrity of the path. It's continuing to grow, to learn, to be brave enough to question your own assumptions. It's doing work that feels meaningful and having a home filled with love. It's passion, not just position. Her perspective had changed because she had been part of the change. She saw that success could be redefined. It wasn't a fixed point on a horizon that everyone is supposed to march towards. It was personal, fluid. She saw that integrity, growth, and passion were currencies more valuable than any salary. And in that moment, I understood the final layer of this redefinition. The greatest success isn't just living a life aligned with your values. It's the ripple effect of that life. It's having the conversations that allow the next generation to define success on their own healthier terms. It's breaking the chain of silent inherited expectations. The legacy isn't what you leave behind in a bank account, it's the question you empower your children to ask, and the tools you give them to find their own authentic answer. You know, for years I thought I had it made. I was the boss. I had my own little marketing consultancy. My name was on the door. I'd tell people I was an entrepreneur. And it sounded good, it felt good. But the truth was in the numbers. And the numbers were a disaster. It all came to a head at my daughter's 16th birthday party. The house was full, music, laughter, the whole thing. I was playing the part of the successful dad. But she saw right through it. I made some dumb joke trying to be the life of the party. And she just looked at me, not with anger really. It was worse than anger. It was this cold, clear disappointment. And she said it quiet enough that only I could hear it over the noise. She said, this operation is not profitable. It hit me like a physical blow. She didn't say I was a bad father. She didn't say I was a failure. She used a business term. She framed my entire life as a failing enterprise. And she was right. I went upstairs to my so-called home office, which was really just a glorified storage closet. And I looked at the spreadsheets. The reality was brutal, stagnant revenue. For 3 years, my rates were a joke, barely higher than they were a decade ago. My overhead was bleeding me dry because I was paying for subscriptions. I never used software. I didn't need trying to look bigger than I was. I was working 60, 70 hours a week. But I was just trading time for money. I didn't own a business. I owned a job, a very stressful, very low-paying job. And the CEO of that operation was a coward. He was afraid to raise prices, afraid to fire bad clients, afraid to invest in himself. My daughter's comment was the audit I never had the guts to perform on myself. That was the trigger, that tiny, casual, thoughtless comment. I saw her expression change completely. It was like watching a mask crack and fall away. The polite, composed daughter vanished, and what was left was raw and honest, and full of a pain I had never allowed myself to fully see. Her face seemed to collapse inward for a second, then tighten, with a resolve that was terrifying. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at that desk, and I made a decision. The emotional shock wasn't going to be something I recovered from. It was going to be the fuel. If she saw my life as a business, then fine. I was going to become the ruthless CEO that business desperately needed. The mindset shift was immediate. I was no longer a guy trying to get by. I was a strategist tasked with a turnaround. This was no longer personal. It was numbers. It was data. And the data was screaming for a complete overhauls. I gave myself 90 days, a single quarter, to change everything. The first thing I did was outsource. I hired a virtual assistant from the Philippines to handle all the administrative tasks. I hate scheduling, email triage, invoicing that cost me a few $100s a month, but gave me back 10 to 15 hours. I immediately used that time to work on the business, not just in it. I audited my client list, and I fired the bottom 20%, the clients who paid late, who demanded the most, who were never happy. I raised my prices for everyone else by 50%. I was terrified doing it. I thought I'd lose them all. But I didn't. I actually lost one, and the rest stayed. They respected the new positioning. Suddenly, I was working less, but making more per hour. That's when I understood leverage. I started tracking everything. I had a dashboard on my computer that showed me daily metrics: leads generated, calls booked, proposals sent, close rate, profit margin per project. I stopped thinking in terms of revenue and started obsessing over profit. Cash flow management became my religion. I knew where every dollar was going. I canceled every non-essential subscription. I negotiated better rates with my suppliers. I became ruthless with expenses. Then I did the scariest thing I'd ever done. Took $10,000 from our savings money that was supposed to be for a family vacation, and I invested it in growth. I hired a business coach who specialized in scaling service-based businesses. I attended a high-level mastermind with other entrepreneurs who were light years ahead of me. I bought proper equipment, a professional microphone, a good camera, lightings. I could create high-quality content. That investment paid for itself in the first month with a single new client who found me through a video. Made. The most tangible symbol of the change was the office. Working from home was a constant reminder of the old chaos. The line between work and life was blurred. And not in a good way. I was always at the office, and the office was always in my home. So 90 days into the plan, I signed a lease on a small but real office space in a professional building. It wasn't huge, but it was mine. It was a statement of intent. This was no longer a hobby. This was a headquarters. The moving process was symbolic. I deliberately left behind the old broken desk, the cheap chair, the stacks of unresolved paperwork. I hired a designer to help me create a space that was focused on productivity and professionalism. We painted the walls a clean, modern gray. I had a proper filming studio set up in one corner with a seamless backdrop and professional lighting, so I could record client videos and my own content. I had a dedicated client meeting area with a comfortable sofa and a large monitor for presentations. My own workspace was minimalist: a standing desk, a large monitor, and nothing else. Everything was organized, every cable was managed. It was a physical manifestation of the new order in my mind. The noise of the party was still all around us. People were laughing loudly. A few feet away, the music was still pounding. But right there, in our little bubble, the air had gone still. Her voice started to tremble. But it wasn't from weakness. It was firm. It was strong. Her eyes, which had been avoiding mine all night, were now locked onto me, and they were glassy with tears she was absolutely refusing to let fall. The financial results were undeniable. In the 90 days prior to my daughter's comment, my revenue was $42,000. My profit, after paying myself a meager salary And all the expenses was just under 8,000 in the 90 days after the transformation. My revenue was $95,000. My profit was 52,000. I more than sextupled my profit. By working fewer hours, I had systems. I had leverage, I had clients who valued what I did and paid me accordingly. The business was finally truly profitable. But the real test was bringing my daughter to see it. A few weeks after Id moved in, I asked her to come by after school. She was hesitant, I could tell. She probably thought it was going to be another version of the cluttered home office. When we walked in, she stopped in the doorway. She just looked around at the clean lines, the quiet hum of the server, the professional setup. I didn't give her a tour. I sat her down in the meeting area. And I opened my laptop. I showed her the dashboard. I showed her the before and after numbers. I showed her the profit and loss statements. I made it a data-driven presentation. I said, you were right, the operation was not profitable, it was failing. But your comment, you called me a cowardly fool that night. And you were right about that too. But I want you to see what that criticism built. You gave me the key piece of data. I was ignoring, you forced me to audit the entire operation. I showed her the graphs, the upward trajectory. This, I said, pointing to the screen, this is the direct result of what you said. You didn't just criticize me, you gave me a strategic tool, and I used it. She was quiet for a long time, just looking at the numbers. Then she looked at me. And for the first time in years, it wasn't with disappointment or distance, it was with something like respect, not for the money, but for the action, for the follow-through. The key takeaway, the lesson I learned and wanted her to see, was that criticism, even the most painful kind, isn't a personal attack. If you don't take it personally, it's market feedback. It's a performance review. It's data, and data is what you use to improve, to iterate, to grow. Her words were the catalyst for a quantifiable change. I leveraged that criticism into a complete financial and business makeover. I went from being broke in spirit and in practice to being the boss of a legitimate, thriving asset. And it all started with a single devastatingly accurate audit from a 16-year-old girl who refused to accept the illusion anymore. The life of a creative, it's not like it is in the movies. There's no big dramatic moment of discovery. Every day, most of it is just showing up. For me, that meant the kitchen table every morning. After you'd left for school, I'd clear away the breakfast dishes, wipe down the crumbs. And that would become my desk, my entire professional world. Right next to the fruit bowl, my computer, my sketchbooks, my notes, all piled up where we'd eaten dinner the night before, and by evening, it all had to be packed away again. The work had to disappear so we could have our family life. The income was irregular. Some months were fantastic, a big commission would come through, and it'd feel like I was on top of the world. I could pay the bills, and even put a little extra in your college fund. Other months were lean, really lean. I'd take on small, boring jobs, just to make sure the mortgage was covered. It was a constant balancing act, a tightrope walk between passion and practicality. And the hardest part wasn't the money, it was the quiet lack of recognition from the outside world. When people asked what I did, I'd say I am a graphic designer and an illustrator. And I'd see their eyes glaze over, or they'd say, "Oh, that's nice," and quickly change the subject to something more solid, something more real, like accounting or sales. "That's just it," she said, and her voice cut through the party chaos like a knife. It was clear and sharp, and it went right through me. "That's the whole point. You're never there for the quiet, you're never there for the hard parts. You show up for the celebrations, you put on the smile, you make the toast. But when I needed you to just be my dad, when things were falling apart, you were nowhere. You checked out, you made yourself busy, you hid." I started to notice it with you too. When you were little, you loved it. You'd sit under the table with your crayons. While I worked, you thought it was magic, that I could draw pictures for a living. But as you got older, things changed. You started seeing how your friends lived. Their parents left the house in suits, went to offices with their names on the door, they had company cars, holiday bonuses. Their work had a weight to it, a substance. My work, mine, was invisible. It happened on a screen. It was packed away into a laptop bag. At 5 o'clock, I saw the way you'd look at my setup on the kitchen table. When your friends came over a little embarrassed, you'd quickly shove my papers to the side to make room for a snack. It was a small thing, but I felt it. I felt the comparison you were making, even if you never said it out loud. Then came the school career day. You were in 8th grade. You begged me not to come. You said the other parents were bringing in charts and graphs, talking about business mergers and engineering projects. You said, "What are you going to bring your drawings?" "It's not the same, Dad. It's just not." I went anyway. I set up a small table with some of my best prints. I talked about color theory, about composition, about the stories you can tell with a single image. The other kids seemed mildly interested, but you stood at the back of the room, your arms crossed, you wouldn't look at me. I drove you home, in silence. The air in the car was so thick you could cut it with a knife. When we pulled into the driveway, you finally spoke. Your voice was quiet, but it hit me with the force of a sledgehammer. You said they have real jobs, you have a hobby, a nice hobby, but it's not the same as being successful. You didn't say it to be cruel. I know that you said it because you believed it, and that was what broke me, because if my own daughter, who I was doing all of this, for who I was trying to build a life for, if you couldn't see the value in my work, then what was the point? That night I sat at the empty kitchen table, and I stared at my hands. I thought about the 20 years I'd spent honing this craft, the late nights, the rejected proposals, the sheer love I had poured into every single project, and it all felt worthless, like I'd built a castle out of sand, and the tide was coming in. I had a full-blown crisis of faith. I asked myself the hardest question: had I wasted my life? Had I chosen a path that was in the end just a glorified pastime? For a few weeks I went through the motions, I did the work, but my heart wasn't in it. The passion had drained out of me. But then something shifted. It wasn't a loud, dramatic moment. It was a quiet, stubborn voice inside me that started to get louder, the voice that said, no, this is not a hobby, this is my life's work. And I am not going to apologize for it anymore. I decided that if my work was going to be invisible, it was because I was allowing it to be. I was treating it like a guest in my own home, something that had to be tidied away. I needed to claim it, to give it a physical space, to declare to myself and to the world that this mattered. That's when the idea for the studio was born. It wasn't just about getting a new office, it was an act of claiming value. It was me saying I am a creator, and this work deserves a dedicated home. We had that old shed at the bottom of the garden. It was full of lawnmowers and rusty tools and boxes of old junk. I saw past all that. I saw the potential: a space with 4 walls and a roof separate from the house, a place where my work could live and breathe without interruption. The design process became my new creative project. This wasn't just about putting up drywall, it was about building a sanctuary. I spent evenings sketching the layout. Where would the light be best for drawing? I needed a big north-facing window. I needed shelving for all my books and supplies. I wanted the colors to be inspiring: a deep, calming blue for the walls, a desk made from a solid slab of reclaimed wood. Every detail was a choice, a reflection of the creative spirit I was trying to honor. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I could feel the eyes of people around us, not staring, but aware that a conversation was happening. I could see the confusion on the face of one of her friends nearby. Funding, it was the hard part. We didn't have thousands of dollars lying around, so I got creative. I launched a Kickstarter campaign, offering small original prints and custom illustrations to backers. I reached out to my network, to past clients. I was humbled by the support. People I hadn't heard from in years chipped in. They left comments saying how my work had touched them. That was validation in itself. But it wasn't enough, so I did the one thing I thought I'd never do. I sold the Starlight Symphony piece. You remember that one, the big intricate cityscape I'd worked on for almost a year? It was my prized possession. A gallery owner had made an offer on it years before, and I'd always refused. It was my masterpiece. But I sold it because building this studio, this testament to a creative life, felt like a bigger masterpiece. I also took on a part-time job for a few months doing layout work for a local magazine. It was tedious, but every paycheck was another brick for the walls. The sacrifice was real, but for the first time it felt purposeful. The day I finished moving in was surreal. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The smell of fresh paint and sawdust, the quiet, the absolute profound quiet. There was no hum of the refrigerator, no phone ringing in another room. This space was mine. I walked over to the big desk, and I placed my hands flat on the wood. It was solid, permanent. This wasn't a corner I was borrowing, this was my domain. The psychological shift was immediate. It was like I had taken off a heavy coat I didn't even know I was wearing. For the first time, I felt like a professional, not someone who dabbled, but someone who presided. When I sat down to work that first day, the focus was different, deeper. I wasn't just fitting work into the cracks of the day. The work was the day. And the work itself changed. It improved. The quality of my output skyrocketed, because I had the space to think, to spread out, to make a mess and leave it. A project could live on a table for days, evolving. I wasn't constantly packing it away. My confidence grew. I started charging what I was actually worth, because my environment reflected that worth. I started taking on bigger, more ambitious projects, and something amazing started to happen. The work I was creating in this new space began to gain real traction. That children's book I illustrated, it got a mention in a major publication. A series of posters I designed went semi-viral online. I started getting emails from agencies. I'd only dreamed of working with the recognition I'd craved for so long was finally starting to materialize. But the funny thing was, it mattered less now, because the real validation had already happened. It happened when I built the studio. The external success was just a nice bonus. A few months after I'd settled in, I knew it was time. I invited you to see it. You were home from college for the weekend. You were hesitant. I think you were expecting a man cave, a glorified shed with a TV. I led you down the garden path. I unlocked the door and let you step in first. I watched your face. I saw your eyes widen as you took it all in, the light streaming through the big window, illuminating the dust motes in the air, the shelves lined with books and pigments, the finished pieces hanging on the walls, the organized chaos of a working studio. You were quiet for a long time. You walked over to the desk, your fingers tracing the grain of the wood. You saw the stacks of sketches, the tools of my trade, all laid out with intention. This wasn't a hobby crammed onto a kitchen table. This was a life's work laid bare. You turned to me, and you just said, "Wow, Dad," and I started to talk. I didn't give a speech. I just explained my process. I showed you the initial thumbnails for a project, the messy middle stages, the final polished piece. I talked about the frustration and the breakthroughs. I showed you that success wasn't a paycheck or a job title. Success was this freedom, this ability to wake up every day and do the thing that made me feel most alive. Success was the courage to build the room, both literally and figuratively. She took a small step closer. When Mom was sick, really sick, and I was so scared. You were at the office when I had to decide about college, and I was so lost. You told me to follow my heart, like that was some kind of helpful advice. It wasn't advice. It was a way for you to not have to get involved, to not have to have a real difficult opinion. For that to happen, I saw the understanding dawn in your eyes. The awe wasn't for the space itself, but for the dedication it represented, for the tangible evidence of a life lived on my own terms. You looked at me, and your voice was soft. You said, "I get it now. I am so sorry I ever called it a hobby." And I told you there was no need to be sorry. Your doubt was the push I needed. It forced me to prove first to myself what this all meant. The resolution wasn't in your apology. It was in your understanding. You finally saw that real success isn't about fitting into a conventional box. It's about having the bravery to build your own box to your own specifications, and to fill it with work that matters. You saw that the masterpiece wasn't any single painting or design. The masterpiece was the journey. It was the decision to stop hiding and start building. And that was worth more than any award or headline. It was everything. She said I wasn't successful. The words just hung there in the air between us, right there at the kitchen table. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. The sun was coming through the window, lighting up the dust motes. And she just said it like it was a simple fact she'd been holding onto for a while. "You've never really been successful, have you, Dad?" It didn't come from a place of malice. I could see that it came from a place of a different education, the one she got from the world outside this house, the one that equates success with accumulation, with the size of your house, the brand of your car, the corner office with the expensive view. She's grown up in a culture that measures a man by his portfolio, both financial and material, and by those metrics I suppose I am a pauper. She looked around the room, and I followed her gaze. The clean lines, the uncluttered surfaces, a single painting on the wall, a bookshelf filled with books, not knickknacks, no grand furniture, no expensive gadgets, sitting out to be seen. To her, in that moment, it must have looked like a lack, an absence, a life that hadn't quite measured up. Her perception was that seeing a lack of stuff was the same as seeing a lack of achievement. And the conflict was right there, palpable. It was a clash between my entire philosophy of enough and the consumerist worldview, shed absorbed by osmosis. I didn't answer right away. I just nodded slowly, letting the weight of her statement settle. Because how do you explain that the emptiness she sees is actually a fullness, that the silence she might mistake for stagnation is actually a profound peace? I pushed my chair back and stood up. "Come with me," I said. "I want to show you something." I didn't lead her to a home office filled with diplomas and awards. I didn't have one. Instead, I walked her down the hall to a small sunlit room at the back of the house. I opened the door, and there it was, my desk. It's just a simple piece of wood, clean and bare, except for a laptop and a small thriving succulent in a terracotta pot. The morning light was falling across it in a perfect rectangle. She stood in the doorway, a little confused. This is it? She asked. This is your office? That's not fair, I managed to whisper. It was a pathetic automatic response. This is it, I said. This is the headquarters. I gestured for her to come in. The room itself was almost empty. White walls, a single comfortable chair, a low bookshelf, against one wall the books well worn. There were no filing cabinets, no piles of paper, no stress. You see this? I said, pointing to the empty surface of the desk. This is my success, this clarity, this space. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice, a long series of choices. Every object I decided not to buy, every subscription I canceled, every debt I avoided, each one of those decisions bought me a little more of this. I tapped the desk. Less clutter doesn't just mean a tidier room. It means a tidier mind, less noise, less debt. Doesn't just mean a healthier bank account. It means more freedom, the freedom. Say no to a job that drains your soul, the freedom to say yes to a Tuesday afternoon walk, because the sun is out. I could see she was listening, but I knew the concept was abstract, so I changed tactics. Let me give you the real tour, I said. I walked over to the bookshelf. This shelf, this isn't just decoration. Every one of these books represents a journey my mind got to take. Because I had the time to read them, I didn't spend my evenings managing my possessions. I spent them here with these ideas. This is a history of Rome. This is a book on philosophy. This is a novel that made me cry. That's a kind of wealth you can't put a price on. Then I picked up my laptop. And this is a tool, it's a portal, it's how I did my work, sure. But it's also how I learned to speak a little Italian before our trip. It's how I design the graphics I do for the local community garden pro bono. It's how I stay connected to friends scattered all over the globe. This little machine on this empty desk is my gateway. It's not a symbol of status. It's a tool for focus and for creation. I put the laptop down and turned to her. The traditional path, the one you're thinking of it, involves building a fortress of things, a big house to fill with stuff, a fancy car to signal your arrival, an office full of imposing furniture to show your importance. But I looked at that path a long time ago. And I asked a simple question. Who is that for? Is it for me, or is it for the people I am trying to impress? I realized I was building a prison for myself, a beautiful, comfortable prison. But a prison. Nonetheless, it'd be trading my hours, my days, my energy, my life for objects that would ultimately own me. It'd have to maintain them, insure them, clean them, worry about them. I led her out of the room, and back to the living room. On the mantelpiece, there were a few framed photographs. I picked one up. It was a picture of us, all of us hiking in the mountains a few years ago. We're all windblown and smiling, really smiling. See this, I said, handing it to her. This is my success. The fact that I was there, that I wasn't stuck in traffic. Or in a meeting I didn't want to be in, or working overtime to pay for a boat I never get to use. My success is the memory of that day, the feeling of. And I was right in the middle of it, playing my part, perfectly. I had my smile on, this practiced, pleasant smile that I've honed over years of these kinds of events, nodding at the right moments, saying the things you're supposed to say. Lovely to see you. The band is great, isn't it? Oh, she's doing wonderfully, just wonderful, performing the role of the good parent, the proud, supportive, always present father. It was a costume I knew how to wear, and tonight it felt tighter than ever. Fair, the word came out like a shot. You want to talk about fair? Do you know what it's like to feel like a burden in your own family, to feel like your problems are just an inconvenience, to learn that the one person who's supposed to be your rock is actually nothing? Her breath hitched. You're just a cowardly fool. The sun on our faces. I picked up another photo. It was me covered in dirt, standing with a group of people at the community garden. This is my success, the time I had to give to dig in the earth and help something grow, to be a part of something bigger than my own bank account. I sat down with her again at the kitchen table. The atmosphere had changed. The accusation had evaporated, replaced by a curious, quiet thoughtfulness. You measured my success by an empty desk, I said softly. And you were right to, because that emptiness is full of intention. That lack of traditional signs is the presence of something else entirely. It's the presence of my life, my actual life, the one I get to live every day. I leaned forward. What is success, really? Is it the number on a paycheck? Is it the square footage of your home? Or is it the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your time is your own? Is it the ability to wake up in the morning and feel excited about the day, not dread? Is it the health you have because you had the time to cook good food and go for a run? Is it the strength of your relationships? Because you were present, truly present, and not constantly distracted by the next purchase or the next promotion. She was looking at the photo of our hiking trip, running her finger over the glass. I guess, I always thought she trailed off. I know what you thought, I said, and it's not your fault, it's the water we all swim in. We're told from the moment we're born that more is better, bigger is better, faster is better. But I want you to think about this. What is the cost of more? It's your time, your freedom, your peace of mind. The most valuable currency we have isn't money, it's attention, it's the hours in the day. And I chose to spend my currency on experiences, on learning, on people, not on things. I gestured around our home. This isn't a testament to what I couldn't achieve, it's a blueprint for a life. I consciously built a life of purpose over possessions. Every object in this house has a use or brings me joy, the rest is gone. And in letting go of all that excess, I made room to breathe, room to think, room to be the father who could actually listen when you came home from school with a story, instead of being buried in emails and bills. Her eyes met mine, and I saw the shift happening, the redefinition. She was starting to see the space not as emptiness, but as potential. She was starting to understand that my lack of traditional success was what afforded me an abundance of the things that are harder to measure, but infinitely more valuable: autonomy, flexibility, serenity. The greatest success, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, is a life lived on your own terms, not the terms set by a boss or a bank or a society screaming that you need to buy more to be more. The most valuable office isn't the one with the expensive chair. It's the clear mind you carry with you everywhere you go. This desk, this empty desk, is my trophy. It's proof that I chose freedom over fluff. It's the command center for a life I designed. She was quiet for a long time, then she smiled, a real understanding smile. She reached out and put her hand on mine. Okay, Dad, she said. Okay, I see it now. And in that moment, I knew the real success wasn't in anything I could show her in a room. It was right there, in that connection, in that understanding, passed from one generation to the next, a better metric, a truer wealth. The words hung in the air. They didn't fade away, they seemed to solidify, to take up space. You're just a cowardly fool. And the craziest part, the most disorienting part, was that the party didn't stop. The crowd kept laughing. Someone let out a whoop of joy on the dance floor. The music kept playing, some upbeat pop song with a relentless, happy rhythm. But the lights, they changed. They didn't feel festive anymore. They felt harsh, like interrogation. Lights, they weren't illuminating the room, they were exposing me. Standing there completely unmasked. After she said it, everything just stopped for me. The sounds around me became muffled, distant, like I was sinking underwater. The vibrant colors of the party dresses, the lights, the decorations all blurred together into a meaningless swirl of brightness. All I could hear was my own heartbeat, pounding, a frantic, panicked rhythm in my ears. It was so loud it was almost deafening. My first instinct was a hot, sharp surge of anger, to fight back, to defend myself, to list all the things I'd done, the money I'd spent, the roof I'd provided, to tell her she was being ungrateful, dramatic, that she didn't understand the pressures of being a provider. That impulse was so strong it tasted metallic in my mouth. But it was instantly drowned by a tidal wave of shame. So profound it felt like a physical weight on my shoulders pushing me down, and with that shame came a terrible dawning realization. My mind started to flash rapid fire through a slideshow of moments, not the big dramatic fights, but the small quiet ones I'd let slip. By the time she came to my home office, her eyes red from crying after a bad breakup. And I told her I had a deadline, that we'd talk later. We never did. The countless school events I'd missed because of a can't miss meeting, the difficult conversations about her future, about her fears, that I'd sidestepped with a joke or a platitude, the slow, quiet, insidious erosion of her trust in me. I had been absent, not physically always, but emotionally consistently. I had chosen the easy path every single time. I looked down at my hands, they were trembling. I tried to make a fist to stop it, but they just shook harder. My throat tightened, and I felt a desperate, clawing need to get out of there, to disappear into the noise and the crowd and just be gone. And in that moment, I understood with a cruel, intimate clarity that her anger, it wasn't really anger. It was just the surface, a reflection, a mirror held up to show me the pain I had caused, a pain I had then ignored for years. She wasn't attacking me, she was finally showing me the wound I had given her. I saw her across the room, my daughter. She was standing near the buffet table talking with a group of her friends from college. She looked radiant, that's the only word for it. She was wearing a dark blue dress that seemed to catch the light in a certain way. And she was smiling. But even from across the room, I could see the distance. It was like there was a glass wall between us, between her, and the entire party. Really, her laughter would ring out. But it had a slightly sharp, brittle edge to it. It would cut off a little too. She didn't say anything else. She just looked at me, her face a mixture of defiance and a profound sadness. She had said what she needed to say. The truth was out, and it was lying there between us, ugly and raw. Then she turned. She just turned and walked away. She moved through the crowd, and people parted for her without even seeming to notice. And the space she left behind was so silent, so utterly empty, that not even the blaring music could ever hope to fill it. I just stood there, frozen, a statue of regret under a glittering disco ball that scattered cheap imitations of light. Everywhere, I couldn't move. I watched her silhouette. As she reached the far doorway framed by the lights from the hall, for a second she paused. And I had a wild, desperate hope that she might look back. But she didn't. She just walked through the door and was gone. And in that stillness, I finally understood the cowardice wasn't just about the things I didn't do. It wasn't about missing a play or a parent-teacher conference. It was much deeper than that. It was about my refusal to face love honestly. Real love isn't just celebration and smiles. It's showing up for the mess. It's being brave enough for the hard, messy, uncomfortable truth. It's sitting in the quiet with someone and not needing to fill the silence with empty words. I had chosen the illusion of a happy family over the difficult work of actually having one. I had been a coward, and she had been brave enough to tell me. The music started to fade, or maybe I was just starting to tune back into the world. The song was ending, and the beat slowed to a final thump. The laughter around me sounded different now, not joyful, but oblivious. I was on the outside of it now, looking in. She was gone, and the truth was here, and it was mine to carry. This wound, this painful open rupture, felt terrible. It felt like an ending, but somewhere beneath the shame and the regret, I felt a tiny, shocking spark of something else. Not hope, not yet, but the understanding that this honesty, as brutal as it was, might be the only thing that could ever truly begin to heal us. It was a cold comfort, but it was the only one I had left. It was a Tuesday night, I think the most ordinary kind of evening. The dishwasher was humming in the kitchen, and we were just sitting in the living room, the glow from the TV flickering, but muted. We were talking about her future, her college plans. She was so full of fire, so sure of the path she was going to carve for herself. And I was so proud. I felt like I'd given her that security, that confidence, by providing a stable, comfortable home. I made some comment, probably leaning back in my favorite armchair, something about how she could take risks, because she had a safe place to land. I meant it as a reassurance. But she looked at me, and her expression wasn't grateful, it was almost pitying. She said, "Dad, you keep talking about safety, about comfort." She leaned forward, and her voice was quiet but terribly clear. "But you've never actually built anything. You've had the same job for 20 years. You talk about your big ideas, but they're just stories. You're not successful, you're just comfortable. There's a difference." The air went out of the room. It wasn't an attack fueled by teenage anger. That I could have handled this was worse. It was a clinical observation, an assessment delivered with a chilling certainty. And the most terrifying part was the silence that followed, because in that silence, I heard the echo of my own doubts, the dreams I'd filed away for a someday that never came, the slight defensiveness I'd feel when old friends talked about their ventures. She wasn't just criticizing my life, she was holding up a mirror to the quickly, and I watched her every few minutes. I'd glance over, hoping to catch her eye, to share one of those little parent-child moments where you just look at each other and you're in on the same secret. But every time I tried, her eyes would slide away, shed focus intently on her friend's story, or shed turn to adjust the strap of her dress. It was a deliberate avoidance, and I felt each one like a tiny, sharp pinprick. Gap between my aspirations and my reality, and the reflection was of a man who had chosen the path of least resistance over and over again. The anger didn't come, instead a cold, heavy realization settled in my stomach. She was right. I wasn't a striver, I was a sitter. And in that moment, I made a silent vow. I wasn't going to argue, I wasn't going to explain my choices, I was going to change the evidence. The next morning I woke up before the sun. The house was silent, but my mind was loud. The first thing I did was redefine the entire concept of success for me. It had always been about a steady paycheck, a paid-off mortgage, a reliable car. But that wasn't success, that was just maintenance. I started a new notebook. On the first page, I didn't write down a financial goal, I wrote, "What do I want to be known for?" The answer wasn't a good provider. It was a builder, a creator, someone who left a mark. I sought out a former colleague who had started his own consulting firm years ago. I bought him lunch, something I would have been too proud to do before, and I asked him not for a job, but for a blueprint. I asked him about the mistakes, the lonely moments, the times he almost quit. I devoured biographies, not just of tech billionaires, but of people who built things with their hands, who started with nothing but an idea. I studied their habits. I realized it wasn't about being a genius, it was about consistency. It was about showing up every single day, especially on the days you didn't want to. I created a vision board, but it wasn't just pictures of tropical beaches and fast cars. It was a map of a life, a photo of a clean modern workshop space, a quote about integrity, a picture of me speaking at a conference, sharing what I'd learned, a sketch of a product design I'd been doodling for a decade. This wasn't about proving my daughter wrong to hurt her. It was about proving to myself that her vision of me was outdated. The first tangible, terrifying step was at the county clerk's office, filling out the forms to register my own LLC, Redwood Solutions. I chose the name for the strength and the longevity. Then I went to the bank. I sat across from a loan officer half my age and presented my business plan. My hands were sweating, but my voice was steady. I was publicly committing. There was no turning back. The grind was absolute. I kept my day job for the first year, so my days started at 4:30 a.m. I would brew a pot of coffee and work until 7 a.m. on designs, on client outreach, on building the website myself. After work, I'd be back at it until midnight. Weekends disappeared. Golf games with friends, lazy Sunday mornings, the all vanished. I was operating on 5 hours of sleep fueled by purpose and an insane amount of caffeine. And the setbacks were constant. The first 3 clients I pitched to politely declined. A manufacturer I trusted delivered a batch of components that were completely defective, setting me back months. And a significant chunk of my savings. Friends would ask how it was going, and I could see the doubt in their eyes. They'd say things like, "Isn't it a risky time for this?" Or maybe, "You should just enjoy your retirement." Learning to smile, to thank them for their concern, and then to go home and work even harder, was discipline in itself. Every failure became a lesson. The defective parts taught me to never skip a quality control check. The rejected pitches taught me to refine my message, to understand my clients' pain points better than they'd. The physical space became my sanctuary and my metaphor. I rented a small, dusty unit in an old industrial park. It was just concrete floors and cinderblock walls. But every evening I was there, I painted the walls a bright white. I installed shelving myself, my muscles aching. I built a workbench from scratch, sweating, covered in sawdust. I felt more alive than I had in 20 years behind a desk. I was literally building my future with my own hands. The small wins kept me going. The first yes. Then for just 1 second it happened. The crowd shifted, someone moved, and there was a clear line between us across the dance floor. And she looked up, our eyes met. It wasn't a long moment, probably less than a second, but it felt suspended in time. It was so fragile. There was no smile in her eyes, just a quiet, searching look, a silent question hanging in the air between us. I didn't know what the question was, and I certainly didn't have an answer. I just offered a weak, questioning smile back. And then from a client, a small local business, who took a chance on me. The first payment that hit my business account the first time, a client emailed just to say thank you, that the solution I designed had saved them thousands. That first profitable month, I didn't even take the money out. I reinvested every penny. The momentum was building slowly at first, then like a snowball rolling downhill. After 2 years of this, the empire, as you call it, was no longer just an idea. Redwood Solutions had outgrown the small unit. I found a new space, a proper street-level office, with a large glass storefront. I designed every inch of it, clean lines, warm wood, accents, a huge central table, made from a slab of reclaimed oak for collaborative work. It was a space that breathed ambition and clarity. It was the physical manifestation of the change inside me. The day we finished moving in, I stood in the middle of the empty office, the evening sun streaming through the big windows, and I knew what I had to do. I called my daughter. She was in her 2nd year of college. I didn't give her many details. I just said I had something I wanted to show her. When she came home for a weekend, I drove her downtown. She was quiet, curious. I parked in front of the new office. The sign with the Redwood logo was lit up. She looked at it, then back at me, a question on her face. I just smiled and led her inside. The look on her face, it's something I will carry with me Forever it wasn't just surprise, it was a complete recalibration. Her eyes widened as she took it all in the professional space. The design samples on the wall, the sense of purpose that filled the air. She walked over to the large oak table, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "You built this," she whispered. I told her everything: the 4:30 a.m. mornings, the failed pitches, the sawdust, and the sweat. I told her that her words that night, as painful as they were, had been the catalyst. They were the jolt I needed to stop being comfortable and start being significant. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of a profound, newfound respect. She didn't apologize for what she'd said, and I didn't want her to. Instead, she said, "Dad, I had no idea. I was so blind. This is incredible." And that was the true victory. It wasn't the office, or the revenue, or the growing client list. It was the restoration of a connection built on a foundation of honesty and action. I told her that her painful truth was the greatest gift she could have ever given me. It forced me to look at the man I had become and decide to build the man I wanted to be. The lesson was clear for both of us: that criticism, when it comes from a place of love, even if it's sharp, is not an indictment. It's an invitation. An invitation to grow, to build, and to ultimately become someone worthy of respect, most importantly your own. The phone calls were always the same, short, to the point. "Hey sweetie, how was school?" "Fine." "Anything interesting happen?" "Not really." I could hear the television in the background on her end, or the sound of her typing on her phone. I'd be sitting in my car, parked outside a client's office, or at the small cluttered desk in the corner of our living room. I'd grasp for something, anything to keep the conversation going. "Got a lot of homework?" "Yeah." "Need any help?" "I'm good." Then, the long pause, the silence wasn't empty, it was. Moment was broken. She looked down and the glass wall slid back into place. Full of everything we weren't saying. I'd end it with, "Okay, well, I love you." And she'd say, "Love you too, Dad." And the line would click dead. I missed her orchestra concert last fall. A big client meeting ran late, and by the time I got across town, the school parking lot was empty. I texted her an apology. She texted back, "It's okay." But it wasn't. I saw the program on the kitchen counter that night, a little checkmark next to her name. I kept it. I started keeping a list in my head, a tally of all the moments I wasn't there: the science fair, the parent-teacher conference, just sitting down for dinner together. I told myself it was for her all. The late nights, the weekends spent hunched over my laptop, it was all to build something better for us. But from where she was standing, it must have just looked like absence. I think she saw the car I drove, the fact that we still lived in the same small house we'd been in since she was a baby. She saw her friends' parents with their new cars and their big vacations. She heard me talk about my big plans, my projects. But she never saw the results. To a teenager, that's just failure. It's empty promises. I could see it in her eyes. Sometimes a quiet disappointment. She thought she was hiding. She wasn't. The argument happened on a Tuesday night. I was tired. It had been a long day, and a deal I'd been working on for months had just fallen through. I was sitting at the kitchen table staring at a spreadsheet, and she asked if I could help her with a history paper. I sighed, without meaning to. It was just a release of breath. But it landed wrong. She snapped. All that quiet disappointment boiled over. "You're always working, but what do you even have to show for it?" Her voice was sharp, louder than I'd heard it in years. "You're not like other dads. You're not successful. You just talk about things, but nothing ever happens." The word hung in the air between us. Successful. It felt like a physical blow. All the stress, the fatigue, the fear that maybe she was right, it welled up in me. My first instinct was to get angry right back, to list all the bills I paid, the roof I kept over our heads, to defend my life's work. But I looked at her face. She was 15. But in that moment, she looked both younger and older than her years. There was real pain there, not just teenage anger. So I didn't say anything. I just listened. I let the silence sit. After her words faded, I saw her shoulders tense, waiting for my reaction, for the fight. When it didn't come, a different kind of tension took over, confusion. She turned and went upstairs, and I heard her door close softly. I sat at that table for a long time. Her words echoed, "Nothing ever happens." And I realized she was right in a way. From her perspective, nothing did happen. She saw the struggle, but not the purpose. She saw me working, but not what I was working toward. I had been so focused on the finish line, on surprising her with the big result, that I forgot to let her see the race. The next weekend, I asked her for help. I didn't apologize for the argument directly. I just went to her room and said, "I need your opinion on something." I showed her the architectural plans For the new office, it was a project I'd been dreaming about for a decade. A proper space for my business, something that was finally actually happening. Her eyes scanned the drawings, skeptical at first. What is this? I decided to go over. I thought maybe, if I just made the effort, if I pushed through the awkwardness, I could bridge that gap. I weaved through the dancing couples, my heart beating a little too fast, for just a simple walk across a room. I reached her group. I placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. She flinched just barely. But I felt it, a tiny recoil. I kept my smile plastered on. Having a good time, sweetheart? I asked. My voice sounded too loud, too cheerful even to me. It's mine, I said. I'm building this. And I have no idea what to do with the inside. I need you to tell me if my ideas are any good. She was quiet for a minute, tracing the lines of the floor plan with her finger. Where's the coffee machine going? She asked. It was such a practical, simple question. It was the first thread. We started slowly. I'd show her paint samples after school. At first she'd just grunt and point to one. But then one afternoon, she said that gray is depressing. You need something with a little warmth. So we looked at warmer grays. We spent an hour online looking at desks. She hated my choice. It looks like a principal's office. She said she found another one, sleek and modern. This is better. It looks like you know what you're doing. I bought the one she picked. It became our thing. Every Saturday we'd go to the building. At first, it was just an empty shell, concrete floors and exposed beams. We'd walk through it. And I'd point out where the main desk would be, where my office would go. I'd tell her about the clients I hoped to have there, the kind of work I wanted to do. I wasn't just building an office, I was trying to build a vision. She could understand. She started bringing her own ideas. She found a picture of a light fixture she liked. She insisted we needed a really comfortable chair for clients to sit in. If they're a comfortable, they'll stay longer and pay you more, she said. And she was probably right. The drives to and from the office became the best part. In the car, we didn't have to look at each other. We'd just talk, looking at the road. Shed tell me about a friend at school or a book she was reading. I'd tell her a story about when I was her age. We talked about her history paper. We didn't really talk about the argument. We were building something new around the crater it had left. The months went by. We picked out flooring together. We argued about artwork. She wanted something abstract and colorful. I wanted something traditional. We compromised. We found a local artist who did modern landscapes. And we bought a piece together. Watching the office take shape was like watching our relationship take shape. It was no longer just my project, it was ours. The walls we painted were walls we had chosen together. The furniture we assembled was arranged according to a plan we both agreed on. The day the office was finally finished, I didn't make a big deal about it. I just asked her if she wanted to see it with all the furniture in place. She said yes. I picked her up from school, and we drove over. I was nervous. This was it. This was the thing I had been working toward, the physical proof of all those years of effort. But more importantly, it was the proof of our last few months of work together. I unlocked the door and let her walk in first. She stopped just inside the doorway. Her eyes moved slowly around the room. She saw the warm gray walls she had chosen. She saw the modern desk, the comfortable client chair. She saw the light fixture she found casting a soft glow over the space. She walked over to the artwork we had compromised on and touched the frame. Then, she saw the small second desk I had added in the corner of my office. I hadn't told her about that. It was a smaller version of the main desk, with a nice lamp and a chair. She turned and her friends politely drifted away, giving us a semblance of privacy. It's a great party, Dad. She said. Her voice was flat, polite, empty. What's that for? She asked, her voice quiet. That's for you, I said, for when you have homework or if you just want to come here after school. It's your space. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just stood there looking at that little desk. Then her shoulders started to shake. I thought she was crying, and my heart sank. But when she turned around, she was smiling. But her eyes were wet. I'm sorry, Dad, she said, for what I said about you being about not being successful. I had no idea. I walked over to her. You don't have to be sorry, I said. You were right. I wasn't showing you anything. I was just talking. I thought I was protecting you from the stress. But all I did was build a wall. I get it now, she said. Success isn't just the thing at the end, it's all of this. She gestured around the room. It's building something, and you let me help you build it. We talked for an hour in that office. We talked about failure, and how sometimes it feels like you're failing because you're in the middle of the work, and no one can see the progress. Yet we talked about how her anger wasn't really about money or cars, but about feeling left out of my life. And I told her how my fear of failing her had made me push her away, without meaning to it, was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. That was last year now. She comes to the office after school twice a week. She does her homework at that little desk. Sometimes she'll look up from her books and ask me a question about my work, or tell me about something that happened in her day. The phone calls aren't short and painful anymore. They're just check-ins. Hey, Dad, running late, see you soon. The office is more than just a place where I work, it's the place where we learn to talk to each other again. The walls aren't just drywall and paint. They're filled with the memory of every conversation we had while choosing them. The success of the business matters, of course it does. But the real success is walking into that room and seeing my daughter at her desk looking up and smiling. She thought she was calling me a failure, but what she was really doing was handing me an invitation to stop working for her and to start working with her. And that's the only success that ever really mattered. Hello, you want to know about the day my daughter, my 15-year-old daughter, sat me down at the kitchen table and effectively fired me from my own life. It was a Tuesday. I think I was wearing my favorite polo shirt, the one with the little stain from the barbecue last 4th of July. And a pair of those sandals, you know, the ones with the socks, of course, practical, comfortable, or so I thought. It is, I agreed, scrambling for something, anything to say. I gestured vaguely toward the center of the room. Everyone's here. It's quite the turnout for your graduation. It was a nothing comment, a filler sentence. But I saw something shift in her eyes, a flicker, a door opening onto something I hadn't intended. She placed a glass of water in front of me with a seriousness usually reserved for hostage negotiations. She had her phone in her hand, not scrolling, just holding it, like it was a clipboard. She said, "Dad, we need to talk, it's an intervention." I thought she was going to complain about my cooking again, about the meatloaf addiction. But no, this was bigger. She started with the car, the 2009 sedan, with the slightly different colored door. The vehicle, she said, her voice flat like a business analyst, presenting a bleak quarterly report. It's not conveying success. It's conveying a cry for help. I was about to defend old Bertha, talk about her great gas mileage. But she cut me off. And the coffee, Dad, that brick of pre-ground store-brand dark roast, it's not a personality, it's a red flag. She paced a little. Your entire existence lacks a coherent brand. Your LinkedIn profile photo is a cropped picture from my cousin's wedding. You're visible in the background, holding a napkin to your face. Your bio says details to follow on what your life. I just sat there, my indignation rising. But it was a weak, sputtering flame, because underneath the outrage, a horrifying little thought began to whisper, she's not wrong. Then came the grand finale. She leaned in, her eyes wide with the brutal honesty only a teenager can muster. Your new hobby, Dad, whittling. You're a 47-year-old man, whittling little animals out of scrap wood. What's your 5-year plan? A fleet of wooden ducks. That one stung. I was proud of that owl. It had a slightly lopsided face, but you could tell it was an owl. I sputtered. I talked about the dignity of a Hansen craft, the peacefulness of it. She just picked up her phone, tapped the screen, and said, there are 3 million videos under whittling. Dad, the market is saturated, you need to pivot. And with that she walked out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my generic coffee and my shattered sense of self. I had been roasted, critiqued, and laid off from my own life by a sophomore who still couldn't consistently remember to put her cereal bowl in the dishwasher. So I did what any rational fired person would do. I decided to prove her wrong. I would become a success. Her version of success. Phase 1 was the digital presence. I created accounts on platforms whose names I barely understood. I tried to make a viral video. The first one was me attempting to do a day in the life video. It was just 3 minutes of me looking for my car keys, sighing heavily, and then drinking coffee while staring blankly at a spreadsheet. It got 7 views. 2 of them were me checking on it. I let her take me clothes shopping. Big mistake. I emerged from the dressing room in a pair of jeans that felt like they were painted on, and a shirt that she called a statement piece. It was just a very loud plaid. I looked like a confused lumberjack who had wandered into a disco. The salesperson gave me a look of profound pity. I bought the clothes, of course. They hung in my closet, a monument to my desperation. The tags still on. I tried to post a sophisticated photo on Instagram. It was me leaning against my car, trying to look contemplative. Someone commented, "Is that your car?" And another wrote, "Did you have a stroke?" That was the turning point. This wasn't me. I was trying to be a teenager's idea of a cool adult, and I was failing spectacularly at both. I sat on the edge of my bed, defeated, surrounded by itchy clothes, and I had a moment of clarity. She was right that I needed a change. But she was wrong about the change. I didn't need to be a TikTok star. I didn't need a brand. I needed a space, a real physical space. That was mine, a place for my projects, my ideas, my slightly obsessive middle-aged energy. I needed an office. But not just any office, it would be my success lair.